I wonder, would all of you join me in a round of applause for all the staff and for the doctors here at Alpine Clinic for making this education series possible? Thank you so much. And I also want to ask all of you to give yourselves a round of applause, because without you, there would be no class tonight. Okay, give it up.
And spreading it word of mouth.
That's right.
Get the message out there.
I'd like you just to look around for a minute. There are a few really smart people there. I'd like you just to turn to someone and congratulate them for being smart tonight and coming in to get this new information about unplugging pain and rebooting your brain. Just turn to the person next to you, just gently nudge them and say, "You're so smart. You're so smart."
Very smart.
Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Our lives are an apprenticeship to the truth." And the first truth I want to talk about tonight is that when your health takes a turn for the worse, it is a wake-up call. And it's a wake-up call for two things. It's a wake-up call for change and for better care. So let's say you're a teenager, you're going along like this, you're sort of immortal, nothing's going to happen. You hit your young adult years, you can still pretty much do anything you want lifestyle-wise, and then one day, your health, and you know that is, it's time to wake up. And that's your body begging you for something to change and to have some better care. There's a principle I'd like to share with you tonight that I have learned through incredible pain, through anxiety, through some despair, and yet once I got around the other end of this principle, there's a great amount of joy involved with that. So I'm here to share that with you. I know that this will be beneficial to someone that you know or to yourself. I guarantee it's going to be great information for you. And I've got about this much information I'd like to share. So we're going to move right along. I want to start by asking you to manage your communication devices. If you have not turned off your cell phone yet, go ahead and do that now. Secondly, this other communication device, if you have a question, would you please write that question down? You have some class notes, just make a little note. And if that question is not answered by the presentation, there will be 10 minutes at the end for you to ask questions. Fair enough? I want to be sure that your questions are answered, that if you'd like to visit with me about your health history or you have specific family concerns that you wanted to talk about that's connected with this presentation, I want to make sure you get the support that you need. And there are ways that we can communicate by email. There are also phone consultations available on my website. Okay? That sound good? I want to make sure everyone gets what they need. All right. Let's start with a medical mystery. I love connections. And there's this fascinating connection that I have found between a medical mystery and a proverb from ancient history. I think that sounds like some kind of book. Maybe I'll write a book about that one. In fact, I'm sure there's some other kind of book coming up. Let's take a look at what this mystery is right now. Today in the United States of America, in fact, all of Western culture, we are more pained and inflamed and broken brain than we have ever been before. Please join me in looking at some of these statistics. And you can see the references here. You can take a look at where this information comes from. It's also found in your class notes, and I invite you to research further if you're interested in any of these things. If these are symptoms that affect your family, go and find more information about it. Today, 85 million people in the United States have inflammation in their circulatory system. They have some form of heart disease. Approximately 350 million people worldwide have arthritis. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of pain people are feeling in the world. Inflammatory bowel syndrome affects 45 million in the U.S., and most of those are women, and we're going to learn why tonight. That's 1 in 4 people worldwide have depression, anxiety, memory loss, or attention deficit. That's from the World Health Organization. And if you check their statistics, currently the diagnoses are increasing roughly 20% per year in the United States. That's a pretty steep increase. 1 in 5 Americans have autoimmune disease. And most of those, again, are women. Back in 2010, just 6 years ago, it was 1 in 20 Americans that had an autoimmune disease. Now it's 1 in 5. So that's according to the National Institutes of Health. The last statistic I want you to look at with me is about food allergy-related emergencies. The Centers for Disease Control report that in the last 10 years, there's been a 50% increase in the United States. Now in Europe, it's far more severe. There's been a 700% or a 7-fold increase in the number of ER visits for food allergy-related emergencies. So that's inflammation in the digestive tract or in the respiratory system that can be fatal. So this is all of these inflammatory states are a living nightmare that does not have to continue for you or me as soon as we wake up. And what are we going to wake up to? We're waking up to some kind of change and some kind of better care, right? Okay, now I want you to go with me back in time 4,000 years to the times of the Old Testament. In the book of Proverbs, there's this interesting sequence of phrases that we find again in the writings of Hippocrates in the year 600 AD. Then again in more past the meridian of time scripture, in the New Testament, we also have this reference to this ancient proverb. And also in more modern scripture, and the proverb is this: first, health in the navel; second, marrow in the bones; third, strength. And this is strength to be able to run, strength to be able to not be weary. It also has to do with fertility, and there are other references. Now, you probably heard this proverb all of your life and may have wondered, what does that have to do with? I want to share with you this fascinating connection between the medical mystery we're experiencing right now in the United States and this ancient proverb. In fact, this proverb applies to all people everywhere throughout all generations. So that's pretty universal. And I promise you the information you get tonight is going to be beneficial to someone that you love. Fast forward with me now about 2,500 years to the year 1980. They're a group of otolaryngologists. These are medical doctors that specialize in ear, nose, and throat disorders. And these are allergists. And this group of doctors, led by Orion Truss, who's an MD, they found it really curious that as they would do these food allergy assays for people, that they had a high incidence of allergy to mold and fungus, right along with their environmental allergies and their food allergies. And they began to form this hypothesis that perhaps this organism, fungus and mold, was playing a part in the creation of allergies. So they began treating people, their patients, with antifungal medications, and found that the allergies actually began to lift. So they found this crazy cool connection. When we treated the body for fungus, that the allergies began to melt away. And they began to piece together this model that we call today leaky gut syndrome. Now, leaky gut syndrome, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about how an allergy is formed. Would you be interested in that? Am I going a little too deep for this group? Raise your hand if you'd like to know how an allergy is born. Okay, raise 2 hands, because you need 2 hands for this. All right? Bring your hands down in front of you, and I want you to interlock your fingers really tightly. No, we don't want any of the light coming through. This, my friends, is a healthy bowel. And the spaces between cells are really tight. And the only way that food can move from your gut into the bloodstream is to be fully digested. That means it's broken down into individual amino acids, to minerals and vitamins, to fatty acids, and to simple sugars, right? So that's the only way they can make it through those spaces. Okay, now go ahead and relax the weave. We want a looser weave right now. We've got that in front of them. You can see big spaces coming through. This, my friends, is a leaky gut. And we're going to talk about how it could possibly get that way. But you notice with those larger spaces, now whatever food is passing by that section of bowel regularly has the opportunity to slip through into the bloodstream. And it might be a chunk of gluten, or it might be a piece of corn molecule, or it might be milk protein. Proteins, we know, are a sequence of amino acids. And unless they're fully broken down into amino acids, they don't belong in the bloodstream yet. So here's what happens. We have a leaky gut. We eat either milk or dairy or soy or one of these highly allergenic products, even sugar, even a sugar chain that slips through. When that reaches the bloodstream, the immune system kind of freaks out and says, wait, I know what proteins mean. That means organism. And we have an organism breaching the bowel. So the immune system triggers an alarm. It's like a fire alarm. And suddenly the immune system's flooding the site with histamines and other proteins trying to block the opening shut so no more of that parasite can get into the body. Now, is it a parasite? No. It's just healthy, might be organic, non-GMO wheat. But the body doesn't know that. All it sees is an invader is coming through. So then we have this inflammatory response from the immune system. And that is the gut quality you might feel after eating really cheesy pizza, or after eating bread all day, or after eating something with really concentrated sugar in it. If you have an experience with stomach pains, pain that moves, this is the body attacking itself from the bloodstream side. Okay, so I want to share a little bit with you about my story. 20 years ago, my life changed quite dramatically. I had a history of declining health that got worse and worse with each of my babies. By the time I had my 4th baby, my regular daily life was headaches, sore muscles, dizziness, I had lack of energy. I was very fatigued. I was sleeping 3+ hours, and even newborn babies don't sleep much more than that. I felt burning when I'd carry just one bag of groceries and step up 1 or 2 stairs. My limbs would just burn. It's like everything was deprived of oxygen in my body. Although I like to go out and walk and I was breathing freely, it's like my body was starving for oxygen. I want to give you an idea there are a couple other things. I had pounding or racing heart when I go out running. There were times when I could feel my heart skip a beat, or I could feel it start with a pound. There were also times when I could just hear my heartbeat in my pillow at night. I'd wake up in the morning, my heart's racing, I've been sleeping all night. There were just a bunch of these weird circulatory problems happening. Welcome to our class. So I want to tell you a little bit about these continual abdominal complaints, about the anxiety that I felt. When I first got married, I was really concerned that I was not going to be able to conceive. It was just sort of a gnawing in the back of my head and then kind of feeling here in my stomach like I'm not going to conceive. And then once I did conceive, I was worried that I was going to have miscarriage. And then I worried that once I got past the first trimester, that baby would be deformed and have birth defects. And then I worried once the baby was actually born that baby would die of SIDS. These were all just haunting me on a regular basis. And with those first 4 kids, once they made it past that SIDS point, I was afraid they were going to choke on an earring or a jelly bean. So I went and took a Utah first responder course. I wanted to be an EMT, so whatever happened to them, I could prevent hard things from happening. I remember one night, my husband, who is very chill, I woke him up one night because he was sound asleep and I was lying there in bed. We lived in the river bottoms of Provo, and I couldn't sleep for the thought that tonight might be the night that the Deer Creek Dam breaks. And if it does, I know, I've read the inundation studies, I know how high that wall of water is going to be. So I woke him up and I said, Brett, how can you sleep at a time like this when the dam could break tonight? And he said, look, I figure if we go, we go. It's our time. How can you? I could not get my head around that kind of thinking. I just lived with kind of this constant gnawing anxiety. One day I called a specialist that I had an appointment 2 weeks out. But I knew I needed to see the specialist. I had great hope that he could help me finally. And I called his office every 20 minutes one morning. It was a Thursday morning. And after about 2 hours of this, every 20 minutes, asking the receptionist, has anyone canceled an appointment that I could get in sooner? She finally said, ma'am, would you please not call our office anymore? We will contact you if there is an opening in the next few days. I thought, okay, you're right. I've lost it. I'm going to be asked to not call. I'm just a little bit anxious. So that runaway anxiety, I can identify with that. Anyway, I knew that if I ate chocolate or sugar on an empty stomach, that would be bad news. So I learned to pad it with protein, go eat something else, and then slam down the sugar. But at times, even when I knew emotional stress was a factor, and that would have me doubled over in bed. But there were times when I ate well and I didn't have apparent stress in my life, and I still just felt blah all the time. I just did not have energy. I felt this low-grade pain and inflammation in my body all the time. So my search began. I consulted every specialist. I married into a very medically connected family. They put me with specialists all over the state of Utah, the finest specialists. I had blood tests and stool tests, ultrasounds and scopes, and every test that I did came back normal. I did have one doctor suggest I just needed a really good support group when I could talk about these things that I perceived I was having in my body, but he couldn't see any of the tests on paper. And that was very depressing to just sort of be giving up on, like, what, you think this is all in my head? I'm just making this up. Like, I have nothing better to do than pay a copay and pay a sitter for all my kids at home to just make this up. Anyway, these were difficult times. And although I didn't have an answer, I did pick up some labels throughout those few years, beginning with colitis, then spastic colon, irritable bowel syndrome, then chronic fatigue, and finally fibromyalgia. And at this point, we had 4 children. I knew I wanted more kids, but I was just in way over my head. I begged God to show me what on earth was going on, what good could possibly come from all this suffering, and to give me some resources to get well. And he did. And over a 2-year period, I was able to heal. I was able to then tolerate all those foods that were causing such a problem for me with all the stomach problems. And I began sharing this information with other people. I spent a lot of time on the phone. I spent a lot of time typing letters and sending them off to people, and finally put it all into a book And the book's called the Feel Good Cookbook, Whole Foods and Allergy-Free Recipes, and it's available here at the clinic. It now has a beautiful white cover. It has a new cover on it, which you'll be able to buy here in the clinic within a couple days. I'll have those out of the shelf. But this book, my favorite part about it is the first 30 pages. The introduction is my recipe for recovery. There's some fascinating connections that we can see between health and our minds. There's a little bit about the mind-body connection, and a lot about how to fix broken brains in this book. It's fabulous. There are hundreds of recipes, too, that are sugar-free, dairy-free, and wheat-free for families. So, leaky gut syndrome, I was fascinated to discover, as I learned more and more about that, that leaky gut syndrome is connected with every autoimmune disease. It is also connected with broken brain conditions. I'd like to invite you to take a look at the screen and raise your hand if you have one family member or close loved one that suffers from one of these conditions. Go ahead and raise your hand. 2 hands. Okay. All right. Several. Okay. All right. What has some medical circles spinning is the apparent connection between this leaky gut and the cause of it. There's a connection here with overgrowth of fungus and yeast in the body and these altered brain states. Prior to this time, when this new model began to form, there was nothing we could do for autoimmune disease but treat the symptoms with medications. That's all we could do, is try to ease pain for people and delay the suffering as long as possible. What we have now is a protocol that people can follow to reverse even fatal autoimmune disease. It's been the most exciting year for me. My favorite story is a mother of 3 kids up in Bend, Oregon, that I met this last year, who was diagnosed with scleroderma. And scleroderma is one of the autoimmune diseases. It's not one that you just languish with. It's one that eventually becomes fatal as your internal organs harden. And to watch her recover over a 3-month period was a beautiful dream. She went back again, had all the same tests that formed her diagnoses, and was no longer diagnosable as with scleroderma because she had reversed those numbers. This is powerful information, and it works, and it's blessing people's lives because it is true. So what caused the gut to get looking like this? I mean, that's pretty hammered looking. So what we have then is the primary cause of leaky gut is these doctors began to form this hypothesis and testing it, is Candida yeast. Now that lives in every mucous membrane of your body. Even healthy babies, when they're born, have a little bit of yeast. What happens though is when yeast goes unchecked, when the competitors for that real estate in your body give up, then yeast is opportunistic and it grows really fast. It flourishes with the next bite of sugar that comes down the gut. So let's talk about for a minute your mucous membranes. Now, if our bodies are composed primarily of connective tissue, we don't have a skeleton, we've got a lot of water, and then our bodies are composed mostly of connective tissue. 90% of that is mucous membrane. So these semi-permeable membranes line every body cavity. The ear, nose, and throat, anything that has contact with the outside world is lined with a permeable mucous membrane. And its job is to keep the outside world out and keep essential parts of you in. We also have mucous membrane that lubricates, that covers every joint, every movable joint in your body. The skin is also mucous membrane that is permeable. It breathes. And when we get infected, we find that there's mucus there. There's pus. If you have an open wound that gets infected, then it also forms pus. So consider for just a minute how much pain you could create if you took any one of the mucous membranes in your body and just inflamed it a little bit. Consider that these include the upper respiratory, the lower respiratory, your entire GI tract, your urinary system, the reproductive system, all these parts, and then every synovial joint in your body. That's a lot of pain. That's ouch if you inflame those. So let's talk about how on earth it happens. How does yeast get out of hand and grow unchecked? Here are several. Wrong way. There we go. Here are just 7 factors I want to just share with you briefly. The first is compromised immunity. This can happen with exposure to toxic chemicals. It can also happen with a major stress event in your life. That could be a major car accident. It could be relationship problems in the family. Whatever creates great trauma emotionally or physically can compromise your immunity and open you to systemic yeast overgrowth. Using antibiotics, this is really common. It's all too common. And every time we kill off bad bacteria, we're killing off the good bacteria as well. We have secondary infection that comes in, but we always have yeast that takes advantage. It's very opportunistic. The third one is high sugar diet. Welcome to America. I mean, that's what we do well. Hormones, whether real or synthetic, this happens via the monthly menstrual cycle for women, and this is one reason why they're more susceptible to leaky gut, because they're constantly being exposed to this fluctuating hormone in the monthly menstrual cycle. Whether that's a synthetic hormone that you're using, or whether that's your own natural hormone, whether that's the pill or repeated pregnancies, the symptoms increase. And this is what I found with each of my babies. I picked up a couple more symptoms with each baby. Pretty soon my jewelry began to bother me and would infect my ears. The lotions I've been using, the Arbonne makeup I've been using for years and years, cause a leathery rash, and I became allergic to that too. If you just stress in our lives, stress raises the acidity in your gut, which actually lowers the pH in your bowel. And you know, if you are spending $25 to $30 on a really high quality probiotic, because we know that that's healthy, and you're taking that into your body, but you're also releasing stress, you're also releasing adrenaline into your body on a regular basis, that very high quality probiotic will not implant. If we're filling our bowels with fear, if we're living with regret, that's adrenaline release. And when it's constant like that, then we will not have the friendly bacteria plant. So it's just like taking your money and cutting it up, sewing it back together, and then flushing it down the toilet. When we aren't living in a peaceful enough state that pH can be a good place for it to implant. Alcoholism in your family tree, we're going to talk a little bit more about the chemistry of alcohol. There are always leaky gut children to alcoholics, and that happens down to the third and fourth generation. The last one is use of steroids or non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I called our local pharmacist in Provo to run this by him. I wanted to make sure this was really legitimate medical information, and confirmed with him that steroids and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, these are ibuprofen, Relafin, naproxen, Mobic, did I say Celebrex? Anyway, these are common non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that we take because we have inflammation and we hurt. And when we take those medications actually erode the very tissue that they are trying to relieve the inflammation in. This Edgemont Pharmacy confirmed for me that these were never intended for long-term use, and yet we do pop those on a regular basis and continue to use them. This creates a vicious cycle. We've got to use the anti-inflammatories more because it's eroding the membranes more, and we become sort of addicted to upping the anti-inflammatories. I want to take just 8 or 9 minutes right now to go through the anatomy of systemic yeast, because most people, when they hear that, they think, that's a girl problem. It does not impact boys, and it doesn't impact children, but it absolutely does. So let's just walk through that. Oh, too fast. Okay. They're not always, but they're usually abdominal complaints because yeast first begins to overgrow in the gut. Back in 1985, the Journal for the American Medical Association ran their own clinical study to confirm that vaginal yeast infections for women had a gut reservoir. So the topical monostat stuff, that was not going to be effective because it would always come back. So then we had pharmaceutical companies inventing the little pink pill. Diflucan was one pill for 7 days, a whole week of treatment. And that was because of this information that came into the medical literature, that whenever you have topical yeast infection, you always have a gut reservoir. So these would be abdominal complaints like all my best friends back then. Nausea, bloating after you eat, cramping, difficulty swallowing. This can also be when you have a stricture in your esophagus and food just won't go down properly, or sphincters that don't open properly to let the food drop down into the stomach. Any kind of stricture affecting the muscle in your digestion are all a part of these digestive complaints. The gut pain that moves around, that was so me. Colic in babies, constipation and diarrhea, going back and forth from constipation to diarrhea. I tested for parasites several times, nothing showed up, but I was treated anyway, twice for Giardia, and it just got worse for me. So I was then tested for fat intolerance, ulcers, lesions, appendicitis, all these were negative. I did have an offer to have my gallbladder removed, even though there were no stones visible from ultrasound, but anyway, often gallbladders removed to try to relieve these abdominal complaints. And yet then we call them phantom symptoms when they continue after the gallbladder is removed. It's because the problem is not in the gallbladder, it is actually in the membrane itself. If you feel bad when you eat certain foods, you have a leaky gut. Those foods are designed to be broken down entirely before they're absorbed into your bloodstream. So that's one indication. If you feel dizzy or stomach pain, you feel headachy or get all stuffy and congested after eating certain foods, then the chances are pretty good that you have leaky gut or systemic yeast. And the next one's really interesting. Hormones, hypoglycemia, and low thyroid. If you have any one of these imbalances, then I know that you have the others as well. Isn't that fascinating? So the symptoms of low thyroid are low basal body temperature, cold hands and feet throughout the year. In the morning when you wake up, you're kind of groggy. You don't do your best thinking because your core temperature is too low. So once I'd get up and start moving around, that would elevate my core temperature, and then I could think straight. I was tested for thyroid, and my doctor said, your thyroid is fine. I thought, well, I have all the symptoms of low thyroid. How can it be fine? Did you talk to it? And what did you do? He said, well, I just tested, and you do have the proper amounts of 2 thyroid hormones that we tested for. So those appear to be circulating in your bloodstream. But somehow they were not hitting the contact points to uptake T2 and T3. They were not being uptaken from my bloodstream properly. Once I did this protocol that we're talking about tonight, then my symptoms abated. Part of my infertility that happened after that 3rd baby, it took us 3 years to get our 4th child, and we wanted one. We had that 3rd one was potty trained at 1 year old. She potty trained herself. I'm like, this is dreamy, let's go for the next one. And it took us 2 more years to get him. And part of that was because my core temperature was just too low. And I learned that as I began exploring what infertility was and what the factors were. And as that popped up again, and as I healed, we were able to have 5 more children and conceive them like, hey, look at each other across the room, and there we go. I mean, it became much more easy for us to conceive and for me to hang on to them. And I feel great. I love it. So let's hear it for babies and healthy moms. All right, just a couple more. If you don't have sugar cravings, then I would question the diagnosis. Because, and this is not a personality flaw, this is really just that organism in you demands to be fed. So if you're craving simple carbs, you're craving bread, that's an indication that you have yeast that's playing into that addiction. Got a fun little, one more thing. We know the obvious infections of the skin: thrush for women, vaginal yeast infection for men, athlete's foot, jock itch, yellow toenails. These are all external signs that there's too much yeast in the body that's trying to get out. The last one, muscle, bones, and joints. I just want to mention that one. If you ache, if you just feel sore all the time in your muscles, like there's lactic acid there, maybe I ran a marathon yesterday, but maybe I didn't, and I still feel just sore all the time. Or if you think all I want is just to have my back rubbed because it's just sore all the time. This is an indication that you have too much acid in the body, and I'll explain in just a minute where that's coming from. I wanted to share a little story, a quick story with you about joint pain, because we're talking tonight about unplugging your pain. This is a woman from Gilbert, Arizona. She said getting rid of yeast and leaky gut has helped so many issues in my family, from allergies to eczema and asthma. However, the most dramatic, she said, was from pain in her wrist. For 4 years, she had this chronic joint pain in her wrist. She finally went into a doctor and had an MRI done on that, and he found there were cysts in her wrist. And she asked him what that was about. He had no explanation for what was in the cysts, I mean, what made the cysts. But she immediately started on this protocol that we'll talk about tonight, and she said within 1 month, 4 years of pain was gone. And she became such an evangelist down in Gilbert, Arizona, that she's one of the retail groups. She's called the Enlightened Homemaker, and then runs her own business now, just helping other people to see this truth and to have that kind of help. All right, let's go on with just a few more of the symptoms of systemic yeast infection. Now, how many of you are like, oh, this is just too much, this is too heavy, it's just hard to get my head around that so much of the body could be affected by this? Are you feeling a little bit dazed? Do we need to get up and do some jumping jacks? Okay, we're going to continue then. All right.
Or jumping jacks, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Low energy, let's see what else is on the list.
So I talked a little bit about circulatory problems, respiratory problems. I had asthma on exertion. I'm a runner. I've been running since 7th grade, and every time I go out to run during this period, I would just feel a tight band right across my chest, but only when I ran. I didn't know that's called asthma on exertion. And I had that for many years, and I would just stop at a street corner and just try to, expand my lungs enough to get past that stricture, that band that I felt right here. If you have low-grade a sore throat or a cough that just won't go away. These are also symptoms. Let's talk about if your favorite place is not to go to a paint store. If you get headachy being near paint fumes or cigarette smoke or a gas station, like close the windows because it gives you a headache. Even if you're doing laundry and you find that the laundry chemicals give you a massive headache. This is chemical sensitivity. You're just becoming more leaky than you need to be. And that part of the outside world is penetrating into your body and your bloodstream, making you feel sick. The last one I want to touch on is brain symptoms. And this was the most troublesome thing for me, the neurological symptoms that I began to experience coming into that fourth pregnancy. They were dull headaches, dizziness, forgetfulness, clumsiness. One day I fell off the sidewalk. How do you do that? I was just walking up the sidewalk and just started tipping over and then just landed on the lawn. It was embarrassing because there were a whole bunch of people that were walking along that way, like, lady, are you okay? I'm like, I don't know what just happened, just my balance, I just fell off the sidewalk. But also, things like accidentally biting your own cheeks, bumping into things, like I was constantly hitting cupboards and furniture, just not being aware of my surroundings, like my body wasn't aware of where I began and ended. That's a symptom that we're going to talk about in just a minute of altered brain chemistry. I actually had 4 petit mal seizures in elementary school. We didn't know what happened, what that was about, except that I had gone without breakfast. They were connected with hypoglycemia. But it scared me that I was going to be epileptic the rest of my life. They're petit mal, but it was still considered a form of epilepsy. Well, then I learned about the ketogenic diet, which is basically a Candida diet. And this is one that was founded by Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital. And I was fascinated to discover that epilepsy is also connected with a leaky gut. And I was so thrilled to know I don't have to be fearful about that for the rest of my life too. But in particular, there were a couple weird things. In addition to the anxiety, I also felt these weird adrenaline surges, like you just want to jump for joy or like just punch somebody. I mean, either one would do. I couldn't understand why kids would have a problem keeping their hands off their neighbor in school. This is what it feels like to have this, this pent-up energy that has to just get out. I also had restless leg syndrome, which is a strange kind of electricity moving up and down your legs. You just want to stamp it out, like, wake up legs. That also is connected with elevated alcohol in your bloodstream and stripping away little bits of magnesium off of your myelin sheath. So it's common knowledge today, ask any medical provider, a nurse or a doctor, to confirm this, that 80% of the body's immunity occurs in the gut. Of course, the way we treat it, of course, its state, whether it looks like this or whether it looks like this, is going to affect our well-being. We don't have time tonight to talk too much about the cancer connection. Oh, let me just show you this. Okay, this is a lady up in Heber Valley, and because her symptoms are all about pain and inflammation and depression, I wanted just to share her story with you. She says after 3 years struggling to get out of bed, gaining weight, and severe depression, all I wanted was to one day say, I haven't felt this good in years. She said, my last trip to my regular doctor, I finally agreed to go on antidepressant after many comments from him saying this will change your life. So she did. And she went on it. She said after 3 days of medication, I felt worse than I have ever felt. This is not the case for everyone. But for her, she said, I stopped. I found an integrated doctor who recommended your program. And on week 5, I'm saying it hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. And I can finally say I haven't felt this good in years. And so that was very exciting to hear about her recovery. She said, I'm not sleeping 12 hours and still waking up fatigued to the point of tears. I've lost 17 pounds. She hadn't begun an exercise program yet, but because I talked about that hormone imbalance, when you have thyroid issues, it affects your body's willingness to pack on weight or willingness to lose weight. And based on your own genetics, based on some other factors, you might become very underweight, which is what happened for me. By the time I had that 4th baby, super concentration camp thighs. I pictured me at like Powell in a swimsuit, and it was like sunken thigh look. And people would say, wow, you look great. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is like concentration camp. But I was able to put that weight back on. Okay, so I want to just touch on one thing about the connection between cancer and Candida, because it helps us understand brain chemistry. So do you mind indulging me in a little story? That be okay? All right. First of all, I want you just to turn to your neighbor for a minute. Just gently shake him on the shoulder and let him know your mucous membranes are so important. Go ahead, just let them know. Your mucous membranes are important. Aren't you glad you're here tonight to discover how important they are? Okay, there's a man named Otto Warburg, and he is a German biochemist. The year is 1931, and he is being awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine. And he's awarded this is in the medical literature, it's very exciting. He discovered and gave the empirical evidence that when a body is too acid, degenerative disease thrives. He was working with tuberculosis, which at that time, that was a major medical problem in the United States and in the Western world. So he was curing tuberculosis for his patients by taking their body, which was over acid, and putting them on an alkaline lifestyle, including a very alkaline diet, and he was reversing tuberculosis. It was a miracle. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for medicine for that. But then 35 years later, he's in a meeting in Lindau, Germany with all of the Nobel laureate. These are the people who've been awarded the Nobel Prize. And so they're chums now, and they get together every few years and they share their research. And he presented that year a paper in Lindau, Germany titled The Primary Cause and Prevention of Cancer. And in this document, which you can read online, he states that cancer happens when regular cell respiration is replaced by fermentation of sugars. Now raise your hand, any of you, if you can tell me what organism ferments sugars.
Yeast.
Bingo. Okay, congratulations. Somebody fist bump. Everyone who said yeast, right there. That's right. This is 1965, and what we've learned since then about Candida yeast is that it has some interesting things to share with us. Actually I need to warn everybody. I need to warn you, if you hyperventilated in biology class in high school, or if you got kind of panicky in chemistry, I want you just to close your eyes for a minute, okay? We don't want anyone going into your rest here tonight.
Long ago.
Okay, this is such a cool little diagram, but I know it's way over, my level. But I was fascinated to find this because it explains so much about how leaky gut progresses and how the body really succumbs to overgrowth of yeast. Now this is just a diagram of how we breathe and how we unlock energy. Did you know that if we weren't breathing, we couldn't digest our food? I mean, breathing is kind of important to life, right? So what is the one thing that every living thing needs to do, including plants? They gotta breathe. Yeah, they gotta have oxygen. But for the animal kingdom, we need oxygen not just to keep our brain alive. We need oxygen to unlock energy from our food. That's what this little diagram is. So just take a look. We're going to divide really quickly, right down the middle. On the left, this is aerobic respiration. This is what we all thought we were doing all these years. This is what happens when there's not an overgrowth of yeast present in the body. So let's just add up. Everyone gets 2 energy units right there. That's adenosine triphosphate. I worked hard to memorize that name. 2 ATP is energy units. On this side, when we don't have yeast in the body, we get 34 more. How many is that? 36 units of energy for one little molecule of, let's say it's an organic apple. Now over on this side, in a body that's now fermenting sugars, like Otto Warburg was saying, we get how many ATP units? How many adenosine triphosphate do we get? 2. Only 2 lousy units of energy. We ate the same organic apple, but we only got 2 units of energy versus 36 units of energy. So this little diagram explains why people who have systemic yeast get so little energy from the food they're eating. It might be the purest non-GMO food and they still feel crappy. So take a look. All right, everyone open your eyes if you haven't closed. This is a little more simplified, right? So yeast-free body, we get all this gorgeous energy. We get a little bit of moisture, a little H2O and CO2 that we exhale. On this side, we get only 2 energy units. Everything else is converted to alcohol and CO2. This is the burping and the bloating and kind of the bellyache after, as it just sort of distends with all that air. That's all the CO2. And this is also the feeling of being kind of spaced out, of feeling a little anxious, of feeling kind of depressed, of feeling irritable, having a quick temper. Take a look here. These are symptoms of elevated alcohol in the body. Dizziness, weakness, fatigue. Just take a look at those. Foggy thinking. This is what happens to someone who's drinking alcohol. This is also what happens to people who have elevated alcohol in the blood without ever touching a glass to their lips. Being easily overwhelmed, incoordinated, clumsy. Remember when I fell off the sidewalk after lunch? Quick temper, irritable, anxiety, irrational fears. Like tonight's the night, the dam is going to break. Nausea, impaired vision. When I would go out running in the mornings, I would see 2 of the Wasatch Mountain line all across. You'd see a lower and an upper on such a mountain. Just something about exercise would stir it all up, and it would end up here in my eyes, and it was just, I'd see 2 moons at night. All the lights at night would be fuzzy around the edges. It was affecting my vision for sure. What else do we have? Addiction to sugar, soft drinks, and breads. Okay, so we can see here that these are signs of elevated blood alcohol. Yeah, these are signs that, especially here in the state of Utah, we have so many people who align themselves with a code of health that says, I am not drinking alcohol. I want you just to turn to your neighbor one more time and say, you too can kick the habit. You too can kick the habit. Even though you haven't had a drink in years, you can kick this habit. Because we're going to get some powerful information in your hands right now about what to do. Okay, 3 things that yeast gives you in exchange for feeding it sugar. The first one is oxalic acid. Now, I don't know if that's just a big fat word. Oxalic acid, we found that with autistic children, they have elevated oxalates. What is going on with that? We also know that if you've had a kidney stone ever, that you never want to repeat that experience.
No.
Again, it's
Kidney stones are no fun.
it's pretty awful.
Okay.
But what are kidney stones formed from? They're from
Calcium.
Calcium
And oxalates. Mostly.
mostly.
Not
Only
everything.
80% of them. Only 80% are that.
Yeah.
The other 20% are uric acid and calcium. So, you know, if your doctor can take a look at the kidney stone and see which flavor it is. But 80% of it. What we do know too, that our doctors also know that only 20% of oxalates come from the food you eat. So they might say no more spinach for you, no more happiness, no more eating these things that have high oxalate.
No berries, no
Oh.
rhubarb, no.
Yeah, no more happiness, right? But we also know that's only 20% of the oxalate in the blood. So where's all the rest of it coming from? It's coming right here, my friends. It's being poured into the bloodstream every time you feed it sugar. So the second thing that yeast gives us is acetaldehyde. The sound of that sounds awful, and especially I imagine if you could open your skull and just pour acetaldehyde in there, how that would alter your brain chemistry. The primary thing to pay attention to about acetaldehyde is that it alters dopamine. Dopamine is our friend. We love to keep our dopamine. Dopamine is responsible for regulating our mood. It motivates us to set goals. It's the creativity hormone. It also helps us to delay gratification. It has a number of other functions that it does. Let me just find my little piece here about. Our dopamine is really, really important.
It's your happy hormone.
Wouldn't it be great? It's the happy hormone. It also regulates your sleep cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really great stuff.
My husband, he has Parkinson's. He'll tell you dopamine is important.
It's so important. If it's being destroyed by some other chemical that really is not native to the body, wouldn't that be powerful information to know? There's a way we might be able to remove all that acid load and let the body pick up again doing what it was designed to do. The third thing that acetaldehyde does, it creates ethanol. Now you might have seen at your local gas station, ethanol is awesome for combustion. It's so great in your car. So the higher the ethanol, the higher the combustion, the more power you get from your engine. But in your brain, it's a neurotoxin, and it has detrimental effects. Among those are that it destroys the enzymes needed for cell energy. It prevents blood from carrying oxygen to your cells. Remember how important oxygen is to every cell? It also causes the release of free radicals that can damage your DNA. So that is not a happy thing to have floating around in your body. But it's one of those things that yeast gives back. So what do we do about this? This is kind of a little mess. Except that we have a protocol. We have some powerful tools because we have knowledge now. And to start with, let's take a look. We've got 5 points. Number 1, we're going to normalize the bowel. And this is a beautiful thing. Once you have regular bowel movements every day, you'll be amazed at how much clearer you can think, how much lighter you feel right here, and how much energy returns to you just with that one simple step. And I want to share with you one little friend that can assist with that. There are many ways of helping to improve your bowel habits. Exodus is an apple cinnamon fiber drink that it's a liquid sponge that will soak up over acid in the stomach. It will also soak up trigger foods. It will soak up a headache, menstrual cramps. If you have bloating, it actually can get in there. You feel like I can't put another thing in that stomach. It will explode. But if you put this Exodus in, it will mop up what is putting off all the gas. It will mop up the gas too. Exodus is an important part, the very first step of this protocol that I'm sharing with you today that's called a reboot. And so step number 1 is we've got to open the main channel of elimination. So you take an entire GI cleanse. Unless you've had a history of bowel obstructions or other resectioning of your bowel, then you would modify step number 1. But it's very important that before you move on to the next step, you are taking the garbage out every single day. One other thing I'll mention about excess, this is actually our family's favorite pharmaceutical. Whenever we go on a trip, I have one child or another that says, "Mom, did you pack any Exodus?" And we just got back from a wonderful Lake Powell trip, and there were a few people that were stepping up to Exodus at night. Like, will that help me feel better?
Billy up to the bar.
Yeah, belly up to the bar, boys. It's great stuff. One other thing that it will do, if you have trouble going to sleep at night, or if you wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep, this is often caused by adrenaline in the stomach. And if you can just sponge that up with a half scoop or 1 scoop of this, then that mops it up and you're able to fall asleep. It's brilliant. I have a good friend here in the Valley who had difficulty. One of her kids just couldn't fall asleep at night, so we watched television until he fell asleep. And she put him on Exodus, just gave him a scoop each night, and he was able to go right to sleep. Just had some kind of anxiety, and you can imagine with adrenaline running there in your stomach that anxiety would just continue. So it's a beautiful thing, Exodus. Step number 2 is, once we have the bowel moving and we're taking the garbage out every day, actually I want to just know, I know we've only met tonight, some of us, but can we talk about what your poo is telling you? Can we talk about that? Is that too scary? Okay. I want you to get really, really personal in your own mind and think, what kind of output am I doing? How am I taking my garbage out every single day? What we're looking for on this protocol is 12 to 14 to 16 inches of garden hose per day. Doesn't matter if it's once. I know that's really exciting for some people. I hear a lot of guys brag about that. One thing down the day and how big theirs was. Anyway, it feels great to just relieve your body. Whether it's once a day or 3 times or 5 times, it doesn't matter. We just want that much volume in a 24-hour period, okay? Step number 2 then is we're going to remove pathogens from the body. So I want to introduce to you this combination of 5 bitter herbs. All bitter herbs are antifungal. They kill yeast. Hot and spicy foods also will kill mold and yeast in the body. Did you know that? We just don't eat a lot of those in our culture, do we? We're not willing to take bitter with the sweet and to create that balance. So because of that, we have a wonderful tool, Body Balance. And these are 5 antifungal, antiviral. One of them is even, has antiviral properties, antipathogen, antiparasite. So this has been used for E. coli, for strep. It's been used for secondary infections of bad bacteria. It's very powerful. And with viral infection, if it's taken within the first 24 hours, it actually helps cold sores, herpes, those kinds of things too, within the first 24 hours. Okay, so we're going to remove pathogens, bad bacteria, and then step number 3 is we're going to repair that gut. Remember this? What if now we talked about how to remove the cause of this, but what about this? It's left kind of shot up. So what we want to do is quickly speed heal that, and that's where our hero glutamine comes in. Glutamine is an essential amino acid. It's the most common one in all of our bodies. It's actually manufactured by the body, but under certain conditions, our body needs to take it in as a supplement. And those conditions are infection or illness. So let's think, with systemic yeast, do we have an infection? Yeah, you bet we do. And it's an illness. You bet it is. So we want to take supplemental glutamine. I read a study back in 2010 of a group of doctors giving glutamine only to peptic ulcer patients and having remarkable cure rates with just glutamine. Not medicating it, but just offering the building blocks necessary to repair the bowel. So you'll find you can cut your recovery time in half by adding this supplement. Now, a couple other wonderful things about glutamine. Not only does it restore the epithelial lining of the bowel, but it cuts your muscle recovery time. So let's say that you like to work out about 10 years ago, this entered the health spotlight for distance runners and weightlifters. And they found that they could really cut their recovery time in half by counting the glutamine. I remember hearing on the radio one day, athletes that use glutamine have fewer colds and flus than athletes who do not. And right away in my mind I'm thinking, it must be doing something for the gut then. If they have higher immunity, it must be helping their gut. And sure enough, when I went to research and I found a study about peptic ulcers, so I added this to the protocol I was sharing with other people and found it has a remarkable ability to cut your time. The other thing is if you have torn muscles, a twisted ankle. One gentleman up in Bend ripped his calf muscle. We had a doctor right there who diagnosed for him. He said, buddy, you're out for 6 weeks. I know the deer hunt's coming up, but you're just going to be laid up. So after we all left, I kind of found my way to him and said, would you be willing to try a little experiment? Would you be willing to take this glutamine and see what we can do for that torn calf muscle? It took about 48 hours, and then he went out hiking in the hills for a week, and he said, I expected it just to come back again or to fail, but he walked right out of it. So I have used it since then. My husband's used it. Our kids, when they're playing soccer or if someone has a kinked neck, it's really powerful to help muscle recovery. Okay, number 4 is restore friendly bacteria. And that, my friends, happens with a strong probiotic blend. We want to find something that has at least 5 strains of probiotic. I prefer one that has some kind of food to target feed your friendly bacteria. So FOS is, you'll see that in the ingredient list, fruit oligosaccharide. It's a non-sugar, but it's sweet. In Japan, they actually will sweeten their soda pop and candy with FOS. I'm like, let's just all move to Japan. Like, take me now. My kids tank up on that kind of sugar because it target feeds friendly bacteria. So there are many different strains here at the Alpine Clinic that you can get. My favorite is probiotic blend that's available on my website. And it is 10 billion colonies per day. That's what we want to do. As soon as you clear that yeast off the membrane, you want to load in a very robust population of friendly bacteria. And what they do is they take over that real estate again, and they prevent hostile takeover from happening again. So it's a very important step. The last one is provide nutritional support. And you should have all this in your class notes. Providing nutritional support. Never go hungry on this program. You'll always want to feel sustained. You want to feel your energy returning more and more every day. You're going to get faster, longer lasting results if you avoid sugar and focus on vegetables, non-gluten grains, plenty of healthy, clean animal protein, and 1 serving of fruit every day. So let that be your dessert. And I recommend you focus on low sugar fruits like berries and green apples rather than bananas and grapes and things that are much higher glycemic because you're just going to feel better. It won't spike your insulin quite so much. With this 5-step protocol, thousands of people have been unplugging their pain and rebooting their brain, and I invite you to join me in a doable cause to spread the word. That help begins in the navel, and I think we can do it. I think we can possibly heal the world. Will you join me? 1 leaky gut at a time. Will you do it? All right, let's hear it, if you will. Thank you. Okay, we have some time, just a few minutes for some questions. Actually, I want to share this because we have a couple of men in the room. We've talked a lot about, we had women, had their testimonials, and some women problems here. But this man had a really remarkable experience with these five steps of this protocol. He suffered from acid reflux. I can't tell you how many men I know that have acid reflux, and they just medicate it. They're kind of too tough to do anything about it. But it's very real, and it's coming from all that yeast. That's all it is. This man found that when he began this 5-step program that I just explained to you, that not only did the IBS stop, but within 3 days, no more acid reflux. That did not return. That's pretty powerful, especially after medicating for 20 years and just getting marginal results. But he found he had to upscale the acid blockers, and then eventually they just still weren't covering it. He said, I did reboot as recommended, lost 5 pounds the first week, and then 20 pounds altogether without exercising. And what I think is really cool that I want to share with you is he did not gain any of the weight back after he reintroduced all those high-carb foods, after he reintroduced wheat, grains, things that break down into sugar in the bloodstream. So that's the promise here, is that we can overcome the food allergy and once again enjoy all the foods that God created for the benefit and use of man. That's kind of an exciting idea, an exciting notion. We're open now for questions. If any of you have something you want to share with the group or a question you want to ask, I'm happy to do that for 10 minutes.
Just how long does this process
That's an
take?
excellent question. Okay, traditional Candida program, if you were taking a medication and working with a medical doctor for a fungal infection, you would say, or she would say, that it's 1 month of therapy for every year that you have been ill. And once you know what you know tonight about, oh my goodness, way back when I had repeated ear infection as a baby, and I had leg aches as a kid growing up. I might have had this for 30 years. That means that I've got to do 30 months of therapy. With this program, because of some of these tools I told you about, especially the glutamine, you can recover in 1 to 2 weeks for every year that you've been ill. Most people, I haven't had anyone use this program longer than 6 months. And this was chronic illness, bedridden. Most people, within 1 month, you have a good feel for how much progress you've made. If you need to continue, you continue the protocol till all of your yeast-related symptoms are gone. And then once they're all gone, continue for 2 more weeks. Because there's sub-level yeast that can be there without you feeling the symptoms quite yet. So I really recommend tying it up with another 2 weeks, and then just keep it on hand. Our extended family love to keep these products on hand just to mop up the holidays. Sometimes we eat things we wouldn't otherwise indulge in, and then hit it with some of the bitter herbs to bring your body back in balance before you pick up a diagnosis of something really critical. So it's dependent on every individual body. You will feel a difference in 7 to 10 days. The other thing that I'll mention is that any of these products that you purchase here at the dispensary or from my website, they are guaranteed to give you results or your money back. I don't want you to be worried. That's always been the case. I don't want you to be worried that you've tried everything and nothing worked, and to put out more money is going to be, who knows if that's going to be throwing good money after bad money. But it's all guaranteed to bring you results. Okay? That's an excellent question. Thank you so much. Can we hear an applause for that question? That was great. That's a good question. I kind of skipped over that. Yeah.
So we went to Lake Powell, and I had a sore throat. So we go to Lake Powell with the Francises. And so I'm like, Janelle, I have a sore throat. And so she's like, okay, well, why don't you gargle with this bitter herb stuff? Because I had tried colloidal silver, and I always like amp up my vitamin C and every kind of vitamin that is in my little medicine cabinet. And it hadn't quite kicked it yet, so I'm like, okay, I'll try what your little bitter herb concoction. So I just gargled with that, and I was good to go for the rest of the trip. So it's like,
I never asked you what happened with that.
I know.
Sorry.
I want some of your
Awesome!
bitter herbs. Yeah.
Oh, let's hear for Tira and sore throat. God, baby. I'm so glad. That's great. Are there any other questions you have? Yeah.
Is that cookbook for just until you're recovered, or is that like a long term?
That's such a good question. People open this cookbook and they say, well, there are these beautiful homemade whole wheat breads. What is that about? This is our working family cookbook. I mean, this is how we eat. I use this 3 times a day sometimes. There's a chapter for breakfast cereals. Now there are recipes that help you with the reboot protocol. There's an appendix in the back for sugar-free, dairy-free, wheat-free recipes. And you can see the titles there, and then go back into the cookbook and find the recipes for them. But there's more here than you'll be using on the protocol. On my website, there's a 1-week meal plan to give you ideas of what to eat for snacks and what to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and how to kind of get started. It isn't as strict. You have to follow this meal plan, but it's just to give you ideas to go on your own. Then as you browse the cookbook, you can pull off a whole bunch more ideas that fit that specification.
And it's totally baby steps. Because when you're addicted to sugar like I am, so it's like baby steps. Just add a little bit at a time. Add your salad.
Bring in some whole food.
Mm-hmm.
Kids may not even know that kids' favorite salad is like raw broccoli, raw cauliflower, and peas, and then the yummy dressing on it.
But you have to.
Kids slam it down.
Yeah,
you gotta start.
You have to give it cool names. Okay,
Yeah,
so
like-
for my kids, we would call it Tigger's favorite, and that is cream of wheat, or whatever. So you have to make it fun. And like Janelle did fun little snacks for the kids where you'd freeze grapes or you'd freeze, whatever, so it's.
Call it something really neat, like
And frozen.
fungus otter pops.
Yeah.
I did blue-green algae one summer and packaged them in otter pop wrappers. That was a weird experiment. But they were really yummy. It was like a green smoothie, Odwalla green smoothie, but then frozen there. Yeah. What is in a name? Well, there's a whole lot wrapped up in a name, and with kids, it makes a difference. So if you call it, this is Dad's chili, best in the entire space system, they're going to be more interested in trying that than this is very healthy and it has, meat substitute, or what? Don't tell them what's in it. Just give it a cool name
Sprouted
and
wheat.
bring them on board. Yeah. That's an awesome idea. It's an awesome thing to point out. Now with children, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a formula for kids who can't swallow capsules or adults who don't digest capsules very well. There's a liquid tincture for the bitter herbs that's available. This could be used topically for babies, diaper rash. It can be used in the ears for an ear infection. It can be gargled for sore throat. It's very powerful topically. If you have, actually, our most recent celebration is using this on warts. One of our kids had warts that we went to the dermatologist 3 times to have the wart burned off. It didn't go. So I snipped little pieces of gauze and little Band-Aids for him, like 7 days, and put the tincture there. And every night I'm like, Isaac, put this on that wart. And for 7 days he did, and finally it kicked the wart. It was, sing hallelujah. He was done having that wart because it showed, and that's not cool when you're 16 years old. So anyway, liquid tincture is also available. The other thing is, how do you get kids to drink something that's yucky? So we have a couple little tricks that we use at our house. We have some drinking cups, and on the bottom of them, I would just draw whatever they like. It's like I'd put a butterfly on the bottom, and then fill it up with water. And they could hold it, and they'd take the tincture in their mouth, and then they drink the water. Save the butterfly, it's going to drown. Hurry, drink it. So they're not thinking about the bitter herbs that are in their mouth. I actually don't think this tastes awful. It has vegetable glycerin that sweetens it a little bit, and so it sort of has. It reminds me of a salad dressing, like vinegar and oil with a little bit of honey in it. It really isn't awful. But some kids are like, ah! So there's some secret tricks. If you have young mommies who need help with this, feel free to contact me via the email on my website or in your class notes, and I'm happy to talk with you about ways to help little ones how to adapt this program for them. There are instructions found online. There are some great testimonials in your class notes. And also online, please, I invite you to go to the website, search for symptoms that you identify with, that your family is struggling with, and read stories of real people who are getting real results today. Will you do that? Share the good news. Do you have any other questions? Okay, I think we'll wrap it up then. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Hope you have a wonderful evening.
We appreciate this so much. Don't you want to just take her home with you? So you can just invite all the neighbors, please listen to this. But
Well, now you can. It's on video, and we'll be posting that on our website if you want to share.
Wonderful.